What's up, hobby friends, and welcome to my video tutorial on how to paint the B1 Battle Droids for Star Wars Shatterpoint. I've got the colors I've used up on the screen now, so if you want to give the video a pause, copy those down, we can dive right on in. So I'm going to start with a couple of airbrush base coats. First, with leather brown, I'm going to lay down a very solid base coat, get a nice even application over the entire model. And then from there, I'm going to apply a quick zenithal highlight with tan earth. Not too finessey, I'm just looking to block in the general colors. We'll fine tune with hand painting afterwards. I'm then going to follow this up with an airbrush coat of gloss varnish in preparation for the Grime Wash. Speaking of the Grime Wash, I'm using a 50-50 mix of Rattling Grime and Lamian Medium to basically break the surface tension in combination with the gloss varnish application. This will help to pull the wash into the recesses and avoid excessive pooling on the big flat surfaces. You can use oils for this, but I find them a little bit messy at times, and I wanted to try something different for these models. From there, we're going to start to fine tune the armor. So I'm going to start with a base coat of tan earth, and I'm going to apply a base coat back onto all of the flat surfaces and leaving the crevices in that deep grime wash. This is a bit of a tedious process. However, this is the primary focus of the models, and I think that this sort of technique or approach really gives a very clean and crisp final application. From there, I'm going to start to highlight in progressive amounts of tan earth into my color to apply my highlights. Again, bit of a tedious process, but as you work your way through the highlights, you should be concentrating more and more on the upper half of the model and in particular front. So it does get a little bit faster as you work your way up through your brighter highlights. From there, my final highlight would be with high key yellow. For this, I'm concentrating on that top half of the model. I'm looking at the tops of the shoulders, the chest, the arms and hands, as well as the head. I do a bit of highlighting on the front portion of the top part of the backpack as well, and then a little bit on the top of the hips as well as the knees. This color is fairly transparent out of the bottle, so there's not too much dilution needed. Just work on that feathering and glazing to create those soft transitions. And again, take your time, make sure your blends are nice and smooth. From there, I'll do a 50-50 mix of leather brown and tan earth in the airbrush, and this is just to add back a bit of a glaze or nuance into the mid and shadow tones. Bring back some low shadows and smooth out some of those blends. I'll do the same thing with Druchii Violet Shade. I dilute this with about a 50-50 mix of the shade and water, just so that the color isn't too saturated, and I'm focusing this mainly on the back part of the model. You can see that I'm targeting some of those deep shadows behind the legs, behind the knees, as well as the backpack and underneath the head. I do paint one of my models as a command officer, and for this I'll be using yellow. So on top of the armor, I'll apply a nice even base coat of AK yellow. And then from there, I'll apply a strong highlight with pale yellow. Now, normally, both of these colors would have a very poor application. However, because of the base tones we already have from the brown, they're a bit easier to apply. And then I'm exaggerating the highlight here for this because my next step, which I'm going to be nuancing with some Game Ink yellow, really knocks back a lot of that value and adds that vibrancy back in. So I want to exaggerate my highlights in anticipation of this stage knocking those highlights back. And then finally, we're going to tackle the black. So first, I'm going to apply a base coat with AK's black. Now, the recording is out of sequence, but when it comes to painting, I recommend doing this first after your grime wash before painting the armor. This way, you can actually, if you do make mistakes, when you go paint the armor again, you can correct over any areas that you overpainted. You can also paint in the eye sockets with this black as well. From there, I'll apply a base coat with ash gray. Much like with the leather brown tan earth on the armor, I'm going to apply a nice flat base coat over all of the large flat areas, leaving the black in the deepest shadows and in all of those creases and crevices. The goal is to have that gray base tone with the black effectively blacklining all of the details on the blaster. From there, I'll do a highlight with dark sea gray. I'll make sure the color is fairly diluted so that I can pull and glaze the color out and create a bit of a softer transition. There's different ways that you can do this. I am most comfortable with glazing and feathering. You can definitely wet blend if you want. You can layer by mixing in progressive amounts of the ash gray and the dark gray together to create your progressive transitions. Whatever you're comfortable with, whatever works, go with that approach. Again, the goal is just get those clean blends on those larger flat areas. Take it up to that pure dark sea gray for the brightest highlights, and make sure that you're being neat and leaving that black lining in the crevices. In particular, on the front of the blaster here, where it has that sort of caged detailing, you really want to make sure that you're really neat at this stage. I think the time spent picking up all these details really helps to elevate the detailing on these miniatures, and it makes them just not just tabletop, but again, that level or that step beyond. And then finally, we're going to bring back our trusty rattling grime, and I'm going to use this to help shade and nuance the blaster. So this wash actually has a bit of an earthy brown tone. So where you're seeing it applied over flatter areas or in the crevices, it actually adds that, as the name suggests, that grime and that dirt. So the blaster doesn't feel so clean, and it adds a bit of color and a bit more tonal variety into the black, so that it doesn't just stay that neutral gray, but it has a bit more of that visual interest. This last stage is also very carefully applied. I don't just fire and forget the wash over an entire area, but I do apply it into the shadows, and then I glaze it back outwards, fading it into my highlighted areas. This way, especially again on those big flat areas, it's a lot neater in the application, and you can control exactly where you want this color to sit. And I think that'll pretty much wrap up the painting on these droids, nice and quick. I chose not to do any other markings because I wanted the battle line, or I guess the battlefield markings or the colorings for the droids. You can do red markings, which I believe are for the security droids, and you can do blue markings, which I believe are for the pilot and naval droids. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more awesome weekly content. And if you want to check out my other social media platforms, I'll have links in the video description below. If you want to check out how I made the bases for these models as well, I'll have a link in the description below that has a tutorial for that as well. So thank you for watching, and as always, until next time, happy hobbying.